Szanowni Państwo, witam serdecznie.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to the panel on the Polish foreign policy and transatlantic relations. I am honored that the organizers have entrusted me with the privilege of facilitating the panel with such great guests. So we have President Aleksander Kwaśniewski, who was the president between 1995 and 2005. Katarzyna Pisarska, political scientist, Dr. Jacek Bartosiak, geopolitician, founder and owner of Strategy&Future Foundation, Witold Jurasz, who is a journalist and diplomat. He works for Onet.pl, and Marta, Poślad, who is the head of CEE and Transatlantic Public Policy at Google. So we will be talking. My name is Traczyk, and I'm a co-founder of the Global Foundation, and we will be discussing. We have little time, so let's proceed with the main topic. We will be talking not only about Poland's foreign policy, but I would also like to talk about the condition of the West, because we can't talk about Poland's foreign policy if we do not consider a broader context. So I think that President Kwaśniewski, unlike any other politician in Poland, is the symbol of Poland joining NATO, European Union. So he took us throughout this route leading to the promised land. So we joined the Western structures that have ensured us with welfare and security. And now we are in the interesting moment of the history. And I would like to characterize our international situation. Mr. President is also a politician who was always looking at the West and who was and the East, and he was involved in shaping our East-related policy too. So, President Kwaśniewski, I would like to give you the floor and present the introductory speech. Thank you for the invitation. You have been inviting me for several years, and now the time has come. So I have been determined to come here. I'm just coming back from the conference in Kiev. There was a delay in my flight, but luckily I am on time, and I'm happy that I'm with you. So when we are talking about Poland and transatlantic relations, it's not an easy task. So I will just address several items, and I will refer to history. So when we are talking about the time 1989, 95, it sounds like ancient times to you, but this period is still important for our modern history. So we had round table, we had the systemic transformation, and the security was of top importance. So I'm summarizing it. Sometimes I'm even simplifying it. So it was all happening in the situation of strong crisis in Soviet Union, which led to the collapse of the USSR in 1991. So Poland was still a member of the Warsaw Treaty. In Poland, we had over 200,000 Soviet soldiers. And there was a problem, which model Poland should follow. It required a debate. So there were two considerations. On the one hand, whether we should propose a kind of a neutrality to Poland. So my political my political camp, that is the left wing, was supporting this approach. Jacek was also supporting this approach. And then we were thinking of joining the NATO treaty. At the time, it sounded like a heresy, but there was a progress in the events, and then it has become a realistic possibility. So we have decided to follow this path, and I think it's one of the most important decisions for the history of Poland. I think that the decision of Poland joining NATO is also an important decision. And people ask me about a decade of my being president. So the first milestone was constitutions of the year 1997. The second milestone was joining NATO, Poland joining NATO, then joining EU. The next specific moment is the Ukrainian, our involvement in Ukraine. And I do hope that Ukraine will also join the European Union. So this decision was very important. I remember how many doubts were raised due to the position of my political camp. I remember the presidential debate in 1995 when Nowak Jeziorański asked me, he was supporting Lech Wałęsa's team. So he was telling me, do you realize that if you become the president, Poland will not join NATO? And I said, well, you are wrong, because when I become the president, Poland will definitely join NATO, because this will be a guarantee that these most skeptical groups will support this idea. They will become ready for this historical decision. It wasn't an easy process. I have to pay tribute to Nowak Jeziorański. He was a great man. Later on, he invited me to Poślad, to his home. He invited the ambassador of the USA in Poland and Polish ambassador to the USA. We had great dinner, and then he said, "I have to apologize you for something. Do you remember the presidential debate?" Yes, I do remember. Although I had a rather foggy memory concerning that debate. I told you that if you become the president, we won't join the NATO structures, and I was wrong. You really helped us to achieve this state. So it was great that he said it. He was a great man. But to finish this historical theme, I think it's worth tackling this exercise. So if in the period 1993, 1995, 98, if we didn't make efforts to join the NATO, I'm afraid that we could share the history of Ukraine, Poland, Hungary and the Czech Republic, the Central Europe would be in a very difficult situation. We would be having different statutes. We would have various road maps, but we wouldn't be able to achieve full membership. So we have to thank Clinton's administration, Mrs. Albright, who was a great an important player, a daughter of a Czech Slovak diplomat, so she understood how important it was for Poland to join NATO, not to stay in this gray zone. Well, this gray zone for Finland was a good idea, because those were the times of the Cold War. But in the period at the end of the Cold War, when the world in the East was quite unpredictable, it would be risky to stay in this gray zone, like Finnish zone, neutral zone. And to me, it was an obvious danger. So on the one hand, we had Clinton, on the other, Yeltsin, and who was against NATO, but he was quite ready to accept some facts, to understand our decisions. He was a man of a different sensitivity than his successor, who rules Russia nowadays, Vladimir Putin. I have little time, right? So no times for anecdotes. Okay. So this will be, what a pity. Okay, so you will give me additional time to share an anecdote. All right. You have to have sense of humor, because a secret of Polish survivor is that, for 1,000 years living between Russia and Germany, the only opportunity, the only chance to survive is our sense of humor. So in Kremlin, I met with Yeltsin, who was very much against NATO, and we had a discussion. And in Kremlin, the acoustics is quite tiring, and Yeltsin's voice was very strong, a baritone, and he said, why do you want to go to NATO? And this echo was heard, so it was quite bad. So I was presenting different arguments why Poland wants to join NATO, and I know that I can use the Polish sense of humor. And I said to him, well, I was speaking Russian, of course, but I will speak Polish. President, please tell me, what are the relations between Russia and Italy? Great. And with Germany? Very good. With Belgium? Very good. Excellent. With Spain? Excellent too. And with Poland, Hungary, and the Czech? Bad, because you want to go to NATO. Why do you need NATO for? So I said, President, please notice, you've got excellent, very good relations with all NATO countries. So I promise you that when our countries, Poland, Czech, and Hungary, will join NATO, our relations will be great, excellent, wonderful, brilliant, whatever. Then he started laughing because he understood that he was trapped. But because what I meant I wanted to tell him about the strategy of the Great Russia, the zone of Russian influences, and the Eastern Europe. We think that we are in the Central Europe. Russians think that we are in Eastern Europe, and they think that Poland should be under Russian influence. So in 1999, we joined NATO. And the situation in the world is as follows. Soviet Union collapsed, the Cold War is finished. Fukuyama is writing a text about the end of history, about a chance that the democratic liberal systems will be developing in most parts of the world. But then there is the 11th of September 2001. Yesterday, we had an anniversary of that event. And as it turned out, this brief period that could be referred to as the America First period, using President Trump's motto. And the world started shaking because some terrorist attacks started. Poland had faced a challenge. We had to decide whether we want to be involved in Afghanistan interventions. Of course, as a NATO member, we had to observe Article 5 of the NATO treaty. Then Iraq intervention was in question. So then, people are asking me how I feel after American withdrawal from Afghanistan. Well, our mission, we can't call it as the winning mission. It was a political failure, but Poland has not lost because we showed our capacity as allies. We were a very young NATO member. Our commanders, our soldiers were very professional. Polish losses were very limited, although we cry for each victim. And from the perspective of showing Poland as an important, responsible partner who is ready to assume risk, it was good decision.
Czy Afganistan można?
Can order be restored to Afghanistan? There are some specialists who can tell more about it. Naively, perhaps, I think that the 20 years which have passed changed something. I don't believe that the people in Afghanistan are ready to take a step back. Looking at Kabul, the number of people who studied, who learned, a complete regression is not possible. Perhaps it's only temporary, but I don't want to talk about Afghanistan, but about the history of transatlantic links. In 2004, Poland achieved one of its major objectives. We became the member of the European Union, and in many of my interviews, I said that the priorities of the Polish policy until EU were America first, then the European Union, then the regional issues, especially Ukraine and the Baltic states, and China and other partners which were far from us. After 2004, I thought these priorities had to be redefined and more attention should be paid to the European relations while maintaining strategic partnership with the USA. During the civic platform, it was implemented, in my opinion. Lauren Justice decided to redefine the priorities of Polish politics because they considered that the relationships with Donald Trump and the USA administration are very important. But I don't think it was the right thing, though I can justify it. However, I can't accept Poland's marginalization in the EU. These are the losses which we suffer on our own request. Poland was invited by Germany, by France, to participate in the European Union's mainstream, and that was the opportunity to be taken. It would even increase after Brexit that nobody expected, but it happened. The European three would be more convenient than the German-French double. Lauren Justice is doing everything to marginalize us, but would they dare to take us away from the European Union? According to the recent polls, over 70% of Poles are for staying in the European Union. These are like minor stones which cause an avalanche. It may turn out that the marginalization of Poland in the EU is continuous, that nobody cares for us, that we cannot affect any major European Union decisions, and consequently we got fewer money. So despite strong pro-European stance, being EU members will be outside it. So not necessarily we leave the EU, but simply reduce our presence. So just to finish, contemporary times. We are where we are. From the point of view of transatlantic bonds, some dangerous, good, and medium things are going on. The good thing is what happened in the USA, that Trump's term of office lasted for only 4 years. Joe Biden and many people who surround him are those who support transatlantic bonds. After Trump's election, Mike Pence came to the Munich conference and delivered a speech that any deputy president could be delivered. So I made the joke that administration has changed, but those who write speeches are exactly the same. It sounded well. He received a round of applause because he said that NATO is important, that America would support everybody, and he was applauded. It was like the same situation when everybody gives a round of applause to the Pope, who confesses that he believes in God. That's not enough, because we were expecting more serious declarations. As for Biden, we can be sure of America's involvement and some specific proposals. That's the good piece of news. However, it did not start with Trump. It started during Obama, whose natural interest was in the Pacific region. Objectively, the weight of transatlantic relations will be decreasing gradually. It will happen due to economic reasons, but also because the social structure in the USA has changed. The founding fathers, the Anglo-Saxon generation of the Irish, Poles, Germans, Italians, are the minority. People from Latin America dominate in the structure of the American population, apart from those ones who have their roots in Europe. So the social structure will not eliminate the weight of transatlantic relations, but it will reduce it significantly. What does it mean? It means that taking care of NATO relations with the USA, we have to strengthen the European power as for military aspects and security. It is about the army, quick response forces. We produce dozens of weapons, tanks, and so on and so forth. But any kind of consolidation of the expenses could contribute to a major change. Shortly speaking, Europe needs to understand that the American umbrella, even if it stays as it used to be, the rains or storms are becoming stronger. So we need a more robust solution. In my opinion, the European motive should be treated more seriously when we think about transatlantic relations. And the last thing, it is very important, China and what to expect. There is no doubt that we are heading towards a crash. Joe Biden says we don't want to be rivals or enemies. We simply want to compete. But China wants to be the greatest global power, and they have opportunity to do so due to demography, production, which will be the highest in the world, the military expenses, interests that they have all over the world. America doesn't want to give up their position of state number one. In the softest version scenario, it must lead to a conflict about which we hear over and over again, and that is already happening in certain areas. We'll also have to remember technological area. In the technological competition, we only take China and the USA into account. Europe is ranked as the third, but losing significantly to these two countries. So, if we are to expect such scenarios as Taiwan, if Taiwan was attacked by China, what would USA do? What would NATO allies do? This scenario, unfortunately, seems quite real, and it should be taken into consideration. Since it may happen, it imposes the obligation to think about it and to get ready to a situation in which we are in an open conflict with some military components between the USA and China, or more probably in a long-term Cold War with all its consequences. For example, a question asked by the Chinese to the European Union partners, who do you prefer? And I'm not really sure whether all European Union member states will support the USA. So this is the problem ahead of us. So just to summarize, we do have some pieces of good news, some bad news, but no doubt from the point of view of Poland and Europe, there is no better solution than to strengthen the North Atlantic Treaty, maintaining partnership relations with the USA, but without any illusions, and strengthening our own safety, security, and military capacity. That's the best response to the challenges we can imagine and which can be ahead of us in the 10 or 15 years perspective. It would be good if we could change the government in Poland for the new strategies. This is our common role. This is something we should wish for, because we live in the times when countries who decide to close the doors and windows and consider the national state in the best form to defend itself against climate changes and other enemies will not survive. And the responsible policy is important. It does not lead us to a fortress that will defend Christian values, but to a lonely island that will be highly vulnerable and unprepared to face the tremendous challenges that will come. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You outlined a journey through foreign policy, and now I would like to ask other panelists to delve into the topics presented by President Kwaśniewski. I would like to ask Katarzyna Pisarska, where is Poland and where is European Union after the pandemic? We do remember the texts saying that the pandemic will break the European Union. It seems that the European Union leaves the pandemics more united with new instruments available. Is it really weakened or perhaps stronger? And where does Poland belong in this new jigsaw puzzle of the European forces? Let me take a holistic approach, which we all accept. The strategic pause of the 1990s that President Kwaśniewski was talking about was a short moment in the history of the world, Europe, and transatlantic relations. We, as Poland, took advantage of it in the maximum way. Being rooted in the Western structures will be evaluated by history as one of the key components of our well-being and safety as the state. But the pause ended, and the world will no longer be as it used to be. The world is unpredictable, and definitely the West, the USA, lose the unilateral nature and capability of agency everywhere. From the point of view of the Polish foreign policy, it's important to remember that the West will not vanish. It will keep existing because it's a group of states and common values shared by Europe, New Zealand, Japan, USA, Canada, that through the liberal paradigm share a common outlook on the world. This is a group of countries that share the values of the state of law, human rights, and many other aspects. So they will respond similarly, whether it's about China, climate change, Russia. This is a group of countries which share the same outlook, so the West will stay with us. Do we still want to be a part of the West? Another process which is happening is consolidation of the European Union. Contrary to the expectations, Brexit did not accelerate disintegration of the member states. Initially, we observed a trend of increasing popularity of the European Union among member states. Except for Italy and slightly Greece, the support for the European Union is over 50%, up to 70-something%. There is also a tremendous external pressure on consolidation, starting from the pandemic through to China's behavior. The European Union has to respond together to some challenges. We talk about common immigration policy that was unbelievable in the past. Now the healthcare policy is common. We have common procurement for vaccinations, and we consider how the European Union can respond holistically. Since the 1950s, every single crisis has been accelerating European integration processes. As for Poland, again, there is the question, do we want to participate in them, or do we want to be somewhere outside? We want to be cast out to the margin. The question is, are we still the part of the strategic West and the West of the values? So, summing up, it seems to me that we're at the point of time when we are at the outskirts. You have just came back from Ukraine, and you can say that Ukraine is at the war front of the world where geopolitics is coming to, the world where big interests are coming to, and we have to make a strategic choice, just like in the 1990s, where we want to be, in no one's land where we are sovereign, or want to be a part of the West, which contributed to Poland being among the top 30 richest countries in the world, and this is where many nations find their home. And Jacek will tell you about geopolitics. Right, the next question goes to Jacek Bartosiak. We heard quite a positive diagnosis that the Western community is going to survive. It seems that Jacek Bartosiak is not so optimistic about it. In his papers, he points out that the West serves the Polish interest not as much as it did before. We should fight for our subjectivity as part of the West, but also be ready to poke our nose out of the current status quo. So I would like to ask you about it, and also could you elaborate on whether we could still believe in the American guarantee of security? For us, it is the key topic. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. Let me answer saying that I like the opening speech delivered by President Kwaśniewski. I have always felt that President Kwaśniewski has an excellent intuition, geopolitical intuition, so he made the right diagnosis. Taking the opportunity to voice my opinion, I would like to be more granular, as the Americans say, when I am to talk about the future. But first, let me refer to the present. Public debate in Poland, and here as well, focuses around two main positions. We can talk it federation or continental position, or Atlantic or zealots of independence. The continental stance is the one that does not see any future for Poland without the European Union. European consolidation is the only solution for the future. Let's assume that it applies to a half of the society, while the other half is for the neo-Atlantic option, or full independence, and wants to use the USA and the neo-Atlantic world to consolidate its liberty, because they think that the European Union is only a transient phenomenon. The two orientations mark the geostrategic orientation of the Polish state. Both orientations are towards the West, but both are wrong. Not because choosing the Eastern orientation is the right direction, but simply they are non-separable, but they are not fully combined. Simply speaking, foreign policy is no longer easy for the Polish state due to the reasons mentioned by President Kwaśniewski. The European Union's federation is uncertain, not because of what Poland is doing, but because of the EU centrifugal forces and because of the storm that is nurturing the EU. And there are different influences from the East and from the West, which does not promote European Union's consolidation. Consequently, the Americans are following the policy which is independent of Europe, which I'm going to elaborate on in a while. Consequently, there is no possibility to follow continental policy as it does not give any guarantee. But we have Russia with its revision policy and China, which tries to breach the order. If the West does not cope with that, the middle class situation will deteriorate. Consequently, the safety at the peripheries of the European safety will be disturbed. The same is true for other Baltic states. The internal conflict in Poland is becoming stronger on what can be changed and where we belong. So the easy times for foreign policy are gone. The independent zealots are also running errands, and in the period 2008-2021, they misunderstood the structural power of the US. The Americans are not omnipotential, and the consequences are suffered now. The mistake they made in autumn last year is not playing with Germany, with Europe as a junior partner. Now we are moved from one place to another, and the disciplining activity on the side of Germany and Europe will become stronger. In other words, I want to show that these options are non-separable, and we should not consider this conjunction as very easy, very simple. These were very good decisions to join the EU and NATO. During the last 30 years, we also made some bad decisions. It's time to close this period and start turn a new leaf. As President Kwaśniewski mentioned, we didn't have sufficiently good Eastern policy. We believed that the West will be interested in it. With the war in Ukraine, in Georgia, Russia stopped the march of the West. And the West was not able to respond. Poland did not play the game either, and during the Zapad maneuvers, the Russians are pulling our safety lock. If the state of emergency lasts for 3 years in Eastern Poland, the businesses will be closed there. We also talked about structural reinforcement of the USA. We didn't understand the nature of increasing the Chinese power. And in autumn 2020, we didn't understand that it's important to play the game with Germany and propose a new role for Poland in Europe, which is consolidating, but with a certain influence on how German economy is working in Central and Eastern Europe, and the place we're going to have in the new Europe with the increasing German power on European consolidation processes. We lacked a vision.
So I would like to talk about Eastern politics, and I would like to ask Witold Jurasz whether we have really neglected our Eastern vector of politics. What has changed within the past years in the East? President has mentioned that Yeltsin took the anecdote and some alcohol, as we know from another president. Now the Russian bear looks differently. So do we have to be afraid a lot of that bear? Or maybe we shouldn't be so much afraid because we've got the European Union and the United States supporting us. I feel very distinguished. Not only the co-panelists are so grand, but also the participants are fantastic. They are spending their Sunday afternoon with us. You are part of our society, so bravo for you. Answering your question, yes, we should be afraid. Not too much, because Russian is a much weaker state, as it always used to be. So this is the time, 20 years of the rule of Vladimir Putin. Well, when there was the time to reform Russia, Russia didn't use that time. Jacek is right, saying that the United States are not omnipowerful. I would like to remind you that the budget of the United States is equal to military budgets of China, Russia, UK, France, South Korea, Japan, Israel, and there are 3 or 4 more countries. I have forgotten which countries they are. So I wouldn't worry too much. I think that the clouds are becoming thicker, but no storms should be forecasted, yes. As far as the Eastern politics is concerned, I think we had this politics, but it wasn't operationalized. We had the situation in Ukraine, and it's thanks to you, President, to a great extent. And in Belarus, well, we had some ideas what we wanted, but we didn't know how to deliver it. And we didn't have a B plan, what to do in case we have failure. So every good foreign politics has to have a B plan, has to have an alternative. So when we are talking about the Eastern politics, we have to come to terms with one thing. We don't have the Eastern vector in the same meaning as Turkey used to have their strategies. They could balance the Eastern vector with the Western one. So we deliver foreign politics actively, although it's quite frightening to meet with Russian diplomats, especially that we followed by media, and some media can accuse us of being spies. So there is no alternative, and this is an objective state, and we cannot change this. So this is one problem of our politics, and the second element is that our partners' egoisms are growing. Whenever I'm talking about the German egoisms, I often hear that this is looking at it as the law and justice things. When we are considering what we should do to make sure that in future Poland has a wiser, a smarter government, well, maybe we should observe those who would like to have more assertive politics. And we should perceive them not as opponents, but people who simply make some mistakes. But there's one intellectual deceit. If somebody is saying that we can become a Turkey in future, this is a cheat. There is no other way out. I have been thinking for a long time today whether I should tell you what I'm going to tell you in a moment. When you see me on this stage, maybe you can tell that there is too much of me, although I'm losing weight, and it's not very good because it has led me to diabetes. So I would like to tell you how I was treating the diabetes. So first I thought that if I don't think about it, it will disappear. Well, but the bad results, medical results, didn't disappear. So it's similar among Polish politicians. If we don't talk about something, it doesn't exist. We can say it somewhere in the margin. Then I was treating this diabetes in another way. I took some pills, and the diabetes disappeared. This is not a good method, and this is law and justice method. It's just enough to announce that we have overcome the diseases, and then the situation will be just great. And there is the third method of curing diabetes. I didn't use it, luckily. So miraculous prescription. And this is a method which is becoming quite common. This is the method which becomes very trendy among young people who are nationalists in a way. They say we will find a new prescription for Poland. And then there is the true method of curing diabetes. So you should have less sweet things. There won't be any miracles, but you will feel better. You should go to a gym. And after 6 months' time, you can discover that your body is working better. Jacek has mentioned two groups, the Continental Alliance. Maybe sometimes I'm too pragmatic, but I think we should have another alliance, an alliance of good work. So you should do good interview. You should finish with the ministerial Poland, and you should look for some strength, and you should avoid false answers, because I think in Poland we have more and more false, fake answers. They are very harmful. At the meta level, we can find 3 scenarios or even more. And the truth is that we have aggressive, non-democratic Russia. And if Russia becomes democratic, it will still be aggressive, because I don't believe that its foreign politics will change. Then there is Ukraine. I'm coming to the end, to the conclusion. So Ukraine is not a failed state, but it's a weak state, and there is Belarus that is seriously threatened, in a serious risk. Now I would like to ask Marta Poślad about this transatlantic section. Very often we perceive it in military context. We look at this military-focused security, and technologies are very important, if not most important. Maybe this is the axis of the future global conflicts. And this technological and economic axis is important. So it is gaining in importance. So I wanted to ask you whether we are dealing with something diagnosed by Trump. We have misunderstandings that cannot be resolved in an amicable way. So Trump was trying some economic wars with Europe. Obama's approach was different. So what now? Which steps we should implement in the Polish-American relations? And what will be the situation of Poland? Are we just a dice in a game, a dice that is thrown by others? Thank you for the question, and thank you for inviting me to this discussion. It's very hard to refer to the question where you are mentioning President Trump, because these different and extreme theses are now denied once the White House administration has changed. Now we can see a lot of Mr. President has mentioned in his introduction, and you have asked about it. You were saying that in future we will have some conflicts, and this is already happening. And it didn't start when the president in the United States has changed. It has been happening for many years, and now I have a feeling that we don't have a luxury of getting prepared for the conflicts. In fact, the conflicts have started. And there is also a bilateral platform between Poland and the United States, between Poland and the East, but there's also the level which will concern European Union's demand of the United States. So when we are looking at trade or technologies, Today, when we're having this discussion, these issues are decided right now. At the end of this month, the United States and the European Union will establish the first joint Council for Trade and Technologies, and it will provide a platform of discussion where we will be able to talk about common values and positive news. But there are also a lot of disputes that have to be resolved. For the last few years in Brussels, in Paris, and in Berlin, we heard about strategic autonomy, digital sovereignty. So Europe on its own, Europe cannot stay on its own in this technological race. So I think we all agree that we want the European Union to be technologically stronger. But in this race, we are quite delayed. So today, searching for a nearest partner who is sharing the values. And I think it's the United States. So we should consider how we could benefit from our mutual resources. When we're talking about this technological race, our politics was rather clear. Poland was brave enough to take a specific position towards Chinese technologies. On the other hand, Poland has provided good infrastructure for American investors. In parallel, for the government of the United States, it didn't matter whether it was Trump's or Biden's White House, because the same people still write presidential speeches. The civil servants continue the same subjects. Maybe they are not very visible, not as the subjects that are covered in the front pages of the newspapers. So Poland had a strong advocate in the United States in terms of trade disputes, and this is why we developed the 3C axis. So Poland. Smaller neighbors are very grateful to Poland because Poland is capable of attracting such partners. And the President has mentioned a train that can leave without us. So now Poland is at the moment where Poland should treat its technological strategy as a part of its foreign policy. I do hope that strong member state of the European Union, which simply deserves a strong position to develop common position, Poland will want to play an important position in this Council for Trade and Technologies. Thank you. I think we can have another round of questions if the panelists keep time. I would also like the participants to ask a couple of questions. So I would like to ask President Kwaśniewski. He was making notes during the interventions of the other speakers. And also, I would like to add a question, because you have mentioned that the authority, the government, should be changed to have new foreign policy. But even if we change the government, if we look at the polarization in Poland, it is very hard to reach consensus. So are we able, can the Polish society have efficient foreign policy? Well, something really bad happened, because the polarization, which started in 2005, and it is deepening, so it is a big problem. When I'm talking with Ukrainians and they are asking me about the reasons that contributed to their success, I'm not telling them about everything, of course, but I emphasize that in the early 90s, we managed to strike a consensus both between the right and left wings in terms of NATO and security and the future civilization development that will be facilitated by being a member state in the European Union. By the end of the 1990s, governments were changing. So if we negotiations with the European Union were very difficult, but the governments, were not really changing, and if they were changing, the values were maintained. Polarization is a fact. I am sure. Why am I so critical about this government? 6 years is a long time. I understand that people can make mistakes. I understand that the external situation is very changeable. But if 6 years have passed and still you don't have a clear and reasonable strategy, so the new government should have this pro-European, transatlantic, strong in terms of strong policy in terms of regions, and it should look for the consensus with citizens. You were saying about these miraculous prescriptions for diabetes. When I hear people discussing about pandemic, on the one hand, we hear experts who say what should do, and then we've got fake experts who say what should be done. So this is the sign of our times. I believe in the vision of Poland, which will be supported by most people. Your contributions, your interventions were very interesting. I'm making notes because maybe later on I will be able to use them, to apply them. But don't worry, I am very sensitive about the copyright. I am in the minority. Actually, lots of politicians repeat other people's words, and they claim that they are their words. Let's get back to the subject of the Eastern politics. We were very involved in the Ukrainian case. This involvement was very effective. Well, I was involved as a president during the Orange Revolution. I contributed to the development of the solution which led to the third election. So we were successful to avoid domestic conflict. I agree that we were missing a concept for Belarus. So we were too passive. We were not active enough. We should have a kind of a position of the country that should have done more about this problem. So we should have developed some competence. We should get to know more people. We should be better in formulating more competent opinions and analysis. But the time has passed, and the position of Belarus, in terms of Belarus, is lost. Russia. In 2002, I have witnessed the history, so I was coming back from the opening of the football championships in Korea, so we lost the game 0-2, and I had a conversation with Putin. It was a personal conversation. It was Putin #1. Now we probably have Putin #3 or 4. So at the time, we were alone, and he said that two strategic goals are to regain the position of the Russian Federation, important on the international arena, and he was successful when we look at Syria or Middle East. So he gained the position, and then the second position is the reconstruction of his zones of influences. It's not possible to rebuild the Soviet Union, so ideology has to be put aside. but the influences must be maintained, and the soft power should be expressed by economic influences, propaganda, communication. That is quite easy to implement in the Russian-speaking parts of Russia. At the time, Putin didn't even mention that he would use armed conflicts, and we know that he used the armed conflict in Georgia or Ukraine. And now the situation is even more dangerous. Putin wants to rebuild the zone of influences: Belarus, Ukraine, Moldavia, Caucasian states, Central Asia, to return to Russian part. Baltic states are not so easy, but some destabilization is possible to achieve.
This is what he intends to do, but he is even more dangerous, but encouraged by these two activities that brought some sanctions, but from the point of view of his internal interest, always increased his popularity as the leader. So the plan is to remembers Lukashenko's weakness to destabilize Ukraine as long as it, due to geopolitical reasons or society's fatigue or because of some other reasons, the pro-Russian forces should gain support to pull Ukraine to their side. It's a long-lasting and painful scenario, but it's rather using the soft power rather than hard power. This is the reality, the real possibilities, and we should come to terms to it. I do agree with the statement that our nationalistic, imperial Russian policy, that it all ends with Putin, can be naive. When I read Navalny's opinion after annexation of Crimea, they didn't differ much. The last proof that something is going on, that there is a long-term plan of preparing the society, is the famous essay written on behalf of Putin, which he signed, which is simply a thesis. There is no such thing as Ukraine, and there has never been something like the Ukrainian nation. It's only a matter of small Russia. And there are no reasons for us not to be together. So this is the factor that is going to be of supreme importance, and that is why the Polish Eastern policy should be competent, active, and based on good sources of information, as well as imagination and conviction that so many things which are risky for us are going on, and we have a role to play. Once there is a meeting of the European Union states and there is a discussion about Belarus or Ukraine, I can't imagine the Polish president's opinion being weaker than the opinion of Spain or Italy. Everybody has their knowledge based on historical experience. So the Eastern policy should and needs to be treated with utmost care. The often repeated mantra is that our influence on the East depends on our situation on the West. So if you were to give advice to this government on how to make the European policy more pragmatic, where we have some room for improvement, Please imagine it's a very short time on television. I would like to challenge Jacek because I don't agree with the statement that there is another vector for us than transatlantic or Western one. You support the position in the middle. I would like to ask you what it is, but just briefly. Answering your question, Adam, we will never avoid a number of dilemmas that we have to face, including the transatlantic relations. Many countries are disappointed with Trump's America and Biden's American. What happened in Afghanistan is food for thought. Perhaps it's the Bretton Woods moment, namely the collapse, which made us think about the euro. Perhaps that's the moment for the foreign policy to be considered without reference to the USA. I don't agree with that, so I always ask who is going to die for Gdańsk? The Greek, the Austrians, the USA is the key partner for security and a very strong military ally, although politically a bit weaker. However, we are going to have the dilemmas and listen to them. Still, there are two pieces of important information. First and foremost, there are so many challenges from technology through to climate change and values that will consolidate the West. But this is the West which wants to be the Western world. Agency matters in foreign policy. We showed in the past, as Poland, we can have agency. Eastern Partnership and joining the EU in 2000 for what President Kwaśniewski, President Kaczyński did later on, and subsequent ministers of foreign affairs managed to convince our partners that our eastern neighbors should be treated in different way than our southern partners, that we should have a special format for the Eastern Partnership. That is why it is so important for our voice to be heard in the European Union, because we could raise certain concerns and say there is no room for conflicts or disagreements between the European Union and the USA. We shouldn't compete where there is no competition, and we should be a unity that will respond to the global problems together. And such agency should be Poland's role. We have to be a part of the mainstream to be able to talk to our Western, Northern, and Southern partners. We should also be ready for compromise, because foreign policy is the ability to strike a compromise and not only to veto. Jacek, where is the center? Where's the halfway? That was exactly the question which I wanted to ask. That's the fourth way. Let me add one more thing. Don't you think that overheated ambitions and such an interpretation by our partners won't lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy that will lead to disintegration of the West in our Central European part? No, I must have been misunderstood, and I wanted to explain it clearly. I told that we should propose to the Germans to be the partners of Europe, but we didn't take the opportunity in autumn 2020. Could you explain what happened then? The point is, we could see that the West is not united, that Germany don't want to go far from China. And we have to become aware of the fact that the Americans are losing the competition with China, and they are on the best way to lose the world. As we know, if the Americans won't change it, the Germans are sitting on the fence because they pretend not to see what is happening. They want to choose their own future, and this disintegrates the West. And we are at the outskirts, and we have to follow something. We won't decide in Warsaw independently. So my option is to wait, but not believe that the West is doing well, because in your questions is whether we should choose BMW or Mercedes and it's all fine. No, it's wrong. From the point of view of the interest of the Republic of Poland, we have been historically influenced by Russia. Putin's policy is as follows. Perhaps President Kwaśniewski suggested in between the lines, the former USSR, internal empire, but actually the Russians suggest to the Americans that perhaps Poland and Central and Eastern Europe will be the stabilization strip between Russia and Western Europe, without nuclear power plants, without new technology, without real army, because it jeopardizes Russia's stabilization. And the Western Europeans are not so reluctant. There is no such thing as the unity of the West. And there are some fundamental differences. Poland is not capable of influencing it. Just one point to make. We must not accept a situation in which we are a stabilization zone, because our children and our grandchildren will again go to the West, because the whole discussion boils down to the question of the margin and safety. So we are pushed away to to a half shade. We are not being pushed, but we move independently. No, that's not so easy. I criticized the Atlantic option, and because the Americans are leaving Eurasia, because they don't have enough power for the challenges. Witold, you're not right when you say that the Americans have the largest budget. The Americans have global challenges. They have to act on global operating theaters, and they don't have enough money to. So they lose the war with China, according to all simulations. If a year ago you asked me the same question, I would say yes, let's promote federal Europe, because there is no future for Poland outside the consolidating Europe. Agreed. But I simply want to show how difficult our geopolitical position is, because Belarus showed that the arrangement of forces determines everything. Europe didn't want to do anything about Belarus. They are not ready. There is no political cohesion or no single vision what to do with our security area. It might be shocking, but NATO has no military capacity. We imagine it has. In the modern war, it will be different. There are only the Americans and just residual capabilities of other countries, but not against Russia. And the Russians know it. And the balance of power is changing. That is why Russians put forward other proposals. They want to differentiate the safety status in our part of Europe, and Polish politicians could do something about it. I can't see the European Union understanding the situation, being ready, having capability, political cohesion, and objectives. A year ago, I believed it was different. Okay, let's put a dot here. Is it really so bad as Jacek presents it? Are we really in such a dramatic situation? A minute and a half. Jacek referred to the Chinese budget, but if we consider that the equipment unit is cheaper there, what amount will we get? 200 billion? 550? No, I haven't read about it. I just found the value of 200. So 550 is still less than 700. The Americans have greater power still. You say that we shouldn't be a stabilization strip. What does it mean? Because your friend says we should send a signal to the Baltic states and to Russia that we won't help the Baltic states in case of an armed conflict because there is no military West. The Germans can tell the same. For me, it's like NATO sabotage. It's good to have, if we had an alternative, that's not that bad, I think. I consider it exaggeration. Telling that the USA is losing with China. You said that USA is a global empire, China is local empire, and lost their power of the past. They have become aggressive. Even if the USA tries to counteract, they are leveraged by certain allies. China lost its temperance. This is what Putin has done. 15 or 20 years ago, Finland was not mentioning membership in NATO. The same applies to Sweden. And that's the ongoing discussion. Let's put a dot here. So last question to Marta Poślad. I would like to refer to John F. Kennedy's words, which he was supposed to announce in Dallas. He was supposed to say that no country can be stronger outside than inside. So I would like to ask you about the role of global digital corporations. Do they strengthen us internally, or do they pose a challenge for our social cohesion? And I'm asking this question in the context of the previous panel we had, where Jakub Jakubowski said that from the perspective of the American government, global corporations pose a major challenge than the Chinese corporations. Let me start with the other statement. It is highlighting, but we have to know that the situation in Taiwan poses a major challenge for the Western world than coping with the technology challenges. We should also see where the power was built. In my opinion, it's the power of richer democracy through to access to information, which deteriorated the participation in democracy. We focus more on problem solving, problems related to technology and who the technology belongs to. I know we have very little time, so I would like to share the message that Russia is doing their internet, China is doing their internet. Poland should not go this way and rather find the ally to offer a common technological approach and getting ready for the future race. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, we don't have time for questions to the audience. We can stay here. Some time for discussion informally. Aleksander Kwaśniewski, Katarzyna Pisarska, Witold Jurasz, Jacek Bartosiak, and Marta Poślad. Thank you very much.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise.
Now warning, flight 1215.
You may now kiss the bride.
Work is different now. We're commuting less, virtually meeting more. Separating work life and life can feel challenging. It's easy to forget that to thrive at work, we need to take care of ourselves. Microsoft Viva Insights offers new experiences to balance productivity and well-being. Personal insights help you stay at your best and most productive. Add structure to your remote workday by opting for a virtual commute, carving out time to have a productive start in the morning and mindfully disconnect in the evening. Protect time before your calendar fills up for focused work, coaching, and learning. Take regular mental breaks with Headspace, tapping into dedicated moments of mindfulness. Use emotional check-ins to tune into your day-to-day mindset and well-being. Strengthen team bonds with Stay Connected experiences that prompt you to praise collaborators, schedule one-on-ones, and follow up on pending commitments and outstanding tasks. Insights for managers and leaders offer windows into how work happens and the impact on employee well-being. Identify where teams may be isolated and take action to break down silos. Quickly discover opportunities to prevent burnout, promote coaching and development, and boost engagement. You and your team's well-being is important, especially in times of change. Taking care of one another allows you to thrive and your organization to build resilience. Experience how new well-being insights in Viva can help.
Liberté Talks to co ważne. Seria Liberté Talks realizowana jest dzięki wsparciu Google oraz Państwa darowiznom. Na podcast Eko Podcast zaprasza Weronika Michalak.